About time for us to get started this morning. Before we are dismissed to our class, we're going to sing number 191. Number 191, Stand Up for Jesus. After we sing, we'll ask Brother Marquise Dotson to lead us in our prayer before class. Stand up for Jesus, ye soldiers of the cross. Lift high his royal banner, it must not suffer loss. From victory unto victory, his army shall he lead, till every foe is vanquished, and Christ is Lord indeed. Stand up for Jesus, the trumpet call away, forth to the mighty conflict, in this his glorious day. Ye that are men now serve him, against unnumbered foes. Let courage rise with danger, and strength to strength oppose. Stand up for Jesus, stand in his strength alone. The arm of flesh will fail you, ye dare not trust your own. Put on the gospel armor, and watching unto prayer, where duty calls or danger, be never wanting there.
Will you bow with me, please? Lord, thank you for another Sunday that we can learn about your word. May we put it to use in our everyday life. And as we go into our classes, may we take that knowledge to bring others to your fold. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
We want to welcome everyone to the Bible study this morning. We are in the book of Esther. The book of Esther. We left off Wednesday night, chapter 5. We left off, I think, at verse 13, but we're going to start at verse 9. Esther chapter 5, verse 9. Do a little review. We know at the end of chapter 4, verse 15, Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan or Susa, and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I'll perish." So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Okay, that led us into chapter 5. Esther agreed to go into the king to petition him, and we know that it could be put to death, but she went in regardless. She was willing to do whatever it took. If I perish, I'll perish. And in the beginning of chapter 5, it says, "Now it happened on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house facing the entrance of the house." So it had to be a very anxious time for Esther, knowing that she could be put to death for showing up unannounced. Remember, she said it had been 30 days since she had been in to see the king. And the king gladly was receptive to Esther, and he put out the golden scepter, which Esther touched the top of it gladly and humbly. So the king was glad to see her. And in verse 3, he says, "What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom." So obviously, King Ahasuerus still had love in his heart for Esther. He respected her. He was willing to give her her request. What was her petition? Even up to the kingdom. Probably a figure of speech by the king. I think we read in Mark chapter, what was that?
Chapter 6, 23.
Yes, where King Herod did the same thing, offered up to half the kingdom. And we know that basically that's a figure of speech, but they're willing to give that petition, give that request, eager to. So we know that Esther requested a banquet that she prepared for them. Verse 5 says, "Bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said." So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared for them. And we know that they love banquets. They had many banquets of wine and drinking and basically partying. But at the first banquet, the king says, "What is your petition? And it shall be granted to you." And once again, up to half of the kingdom, it shall be done. But Esther said, "My petition or request is this: if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let King and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them tomorrow." So we don't know the reasoning why that she wanted another banquet, another day. It could have been a number of reasons. It could have been that she was nervous. It could have been that she wanted more. We talked about this. Harold made the mention that she wanted to soften King Ahasuerus up, and that was probably the case for another banquet. But to give him more time to pray to God, if you will, and give her another day to soften up King Ahasuerus. She was being cautious. But we can once again see the providential care of God working his plan from the very first chapter and up until this very point that we're Okay, verse 9. Verse 9. So Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand or move before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and called for his friends and for his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king. Okay. So Haman went his way joyfully. Haman was puffed up. He was proud of the honor. He was being invited by the queen to her feast. Haman was a proud man. He was a egotistical maniac, if you will. He was proud of himself. Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 24 says, "A proud and haughty man, scoffer is his name. He acts with arrogant pride." Haman had money. Haman had power, obviously, next in command to the king. And he loved the prestige more than anything. But Mordecai was, he was the fly in the ointment for Haman. He basically was, Haman was fretting the slight or disrespect that Mordecai put upon him. And therefore it made him uneasy. And in verse 10, Haman restrained himself. Don't know why. He could have took a sword and plunged it through Mordecai's chest, but he did not. He restrained himself. He was probably more excited about getting home to pat himself on the back and tell his wife and his friends all about what's happening to him. And so he was more concerned about that. And in verse 11, Haman took notice of his own riches and honors. You know, here we go. He's patting himself on the back. The enormity of his family and the high post in which he was set. The king, I don't know what he saw in Haman, but the king obviously liked Haman and put him next in charge. And he's excited. He's bragging about it to his wife, to his family. Now he had advanced above all the officials. But there was one thing that he did not have, that he wanted, was honor and respect from Mordecai. And Haman does not know this will be the downfall of him. But you know, you would think a person would be satisfied with all those riches and power. You know, he was willing to give the king all that money for the decree of killing the Jews. And so he had power, he had riches, he had everything. But that one thing he did not have that he wanted was the respect that he thought he deserved from Mordecai. Mordecai was not willing to give it to him. You know, and you see, there's people like that today, that their pride can cause them to do many different things, bad things. And so this is, like I read Proverbs 21:24. That's Haman. He's a proud and boastful egomaniac.
Stacy,
Yes, sir.
Proverbs 16:18. Pride goeth before destruction, and
This is the best example of that.
yeah,
that we can probably find. And his pride basically caused his destruction.
And what is about to happen is a greater blow to it. What we're fixing to go
Yes.
into in the next chapter.
Yes, yes, chapter 6. Anybody else? Any more thoughts, comments? This is a class, so you can speak up. All right, we'll read verse 12. Let's just read 12, 13, and 14. Finish the chapter. Moreover, Haman said, besides, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared. And tomorrow I am again invited by her, along with the king. 13, I love this verse. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife, Zeresh, and all his friends said to him, let a gallows be made, 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. Haman is a big dummy. When I was a child, we would watch a sitcom called Sanford and Son. And Sanford would get upset with his son, and he would call him a big dummy for something that he had done. Well, I thought about this when I read these verses. Haman's a big dummy, and his wife is one as well, and his friends. But verse 12, Haman shows his pride. Once again, Queen Esther invited no one but me, to come in with the king, and again tomorrow as well.
That makes him special.
Makes him special. You know, he's puffed up. Haman is riding the wave like a surfer would. But a wave can come crashing down rather quickly. And so, yes, Haman loved patting himself on the back.
Haman loved Haman.
Yes, Haman loved Haman. He basically, in his mind, is the most popular man in Persia. He thinks. He's fixing to be well known.
Stacy,
Yes, sir.
I think in one of the earlier chapters, you asked how high a gallus would be.
Yes.
Well, this tells us here that this particular one, I don't know if that's the rule, but we're 75 feet high.
75 feet high. It's 50 cubits, and a cubit is 1.5.
Approximately 18
Appro-
inches.
Okay. So yes, 75 feet. Why would you build anything that high to hang someone on?
Make it more visible.
Yes, probably Haman wanted everybody to see,
Yeah.
you know, from a distance that Mordecai was hanging on that gallows. What happened to him for disrespecting the famous Haman? That's 75 feet. Well, you can imagine a basketball goal is 15. 10. That's right. 15 they couldn't dunk, could they? Some of them probably could. But 10 foot high, so you could just imagine, 7 times that looking up. But he, what he don't know, he built it for Mordecai, but be a surprise for him in chapter 6. In verse 13, he says, yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see that Mordecai, that Jew, that will not bow down to me, will not worship me, basically. And so this, he's not satisfied with everything that he has, that he's got, the position that he has. Like I said earlier, Mordecai was the fly in the ointment in Haman's mind. It made his enjoyment of all this meaningless, basically. As long as Mordecai lived and had a place at the gate. We noticed a lot of times we read Mordecai, he's at the gate, so he's taking care of his business. In verse 14, basically meditating revenge, and assisted therein by his wife, Zeresh, and his friends. They wanted to make him happy. You know, they wanted to please Haman, to build a gallows which he would execute Mordecai on. And we just stated 70 feet in height, 50 cubits. They were being built, and he could go to the king early, tell the king about it before they went to the banquet, and everything would be perfect. All right, that concludes chapter 5. Any thoughts or comments up to this point? We have 10 chapters. The last chapter is rather short, so we're rapidly going through the book. Chapter 6 is a good one, though. Chapter 6. Okay, before we get into chapter 6, let's go backwards a little bit, kind of set the stage for chapter 6. Let's go back to chapter 2, and beginning at verse 19 and read through 23. I can recall the first time years ago I taught this book, and the first time I read this, I thought, why is this in here? Why are these few verses in here? But it's in there for a reason, obviously, because God put it there first. Verse 19 of chapter 2 says, when virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, the doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. A lot of people probably wanted to do what these two men did. King Ahasuerus was probably unpopular with a lot of people. So these two individuals wanted to do what most people probably wanted to do. But anyway, verse 22. So the matter became known to Mordecai, because he was at the king's gate, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed. And both were hanged on a gallows. It didn't say the height of the gallows, but both of them were hanged on gallows. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. So this was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in front of the king. So Mordecai did this to save the king, basically. And in this chapter 6, this is where it comes back. All right, let's read the first 3 verses. Chapter 6, verse 1. That night the king could not sleep, so one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles. And they were read before the king, and it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers, who had sought to lay hands hands on King Ahasuerus. Then the king said, "What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" And the king's servants who attended him said, "Nothing has been done for him." All right. On that night, he could not sleep. Even after a banquet of wine that he just had, you'd think he would be relaxed. But for whatever reason, the insomnia set in. Could be providential care of God once again. Perhaps he was thinking about Esther and her petition. What could she be wanting? What would she be requesting? The king knows it's important what's on Esther's mind because of her showing up unannounced. He knows the severity of an individual, even the queen, showing up unannounced could be put to death. So he could be pondering that, or there's a number of things that could be going through his mind when he could not sleep. But he called to have the books of the records. And going back to chapter 2, this is where it comes. It says the journals of his reign read to him. Now we don't know if the individual reading started at a certain place or just happened to come to this particular part of the Chronicles. Excuse me. But it was read to him and brought back to his attention what Mordecai did for him. Basically saved his life. These two gentlemen had conspired to kill him. So Mordecai, this is verse 3, the king inquired what honor and dignity had been done to Mordecai for this. He suspected, rightfully so, that this service that Mordecai had done for him had been unrewarded. Mordecai just kept going about his daily business. You know, he was not like Haman. He didn't want the attention. He didn't want the, he was not boastful. He was not proud. And the servants informed the king that nothing had been done for Mordecai for this loyal service. And there he still sat. Basically, Mordecai rises no higher than the king's gate, while the proud ambitions of Haman gets the king's ear and heart. Here a man saved his life, Mordecai, but for whatever reason, Haman had the ear and the heart of the king. Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 23, a man's pride will bring him low, but the humble in spirit will retain honor. This is Haman and Mordecai. A man's pride will bring him low, but the humble in spirit will retain honor. Just let that sink in. The greatest merits and the best services are often overlooked and can go unrewarded among men. People, even in the church, local congregations, a lot of people will do a lot of things that we don't know about. Good things. And they do them for the right reason. They don't do those good things to get noticed or to get people to pat them on the back. They do it because they want to do it. It's the right thing to do. And they don't need high praises to do it. Little honor is done to those who best deserve it and will do most good with it. Mordecai at this time, basically by the king's decree, doomed with all the other Jews to total destruction, although it is owned that he deserved dignity. The king saw fit to honor Mordecai. Bad news for Haman. Bad news for Haman. Haman, his wife and his friends have already got a plan made. Built the gallows 75 feet high to hang Mordecai. Now Mordecai is going to be the one that's dignified. Providential care of God. God is not mentioned in this book at all, but his footprints are all over it. Any thoughts, comments on those first 3 verses? There's a lot there. You could, Brother Odell, you could preach a lesson on those 3 verses. Verse 4. Let's do 4, 5, and 6. So the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. Oh boy, Haman. Big dummy. Now Haman thought in his heart, "Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?" I skipped a verse, didn't I? Hang on. Let me go back. Let me go back to 4. Let me start over. Lost my place. So the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, "Haman is there standing in the court." And the king said, "Let him come in." The king loved Haman. Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king asked him, "What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor?" Now Haman thought in his heart, "Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?" Okay. Big dummy. Okay, so the king basically is resolved to reward Mordecai, but even before he had time to announce the reward and announce his decision, here comes Haman. Good timing for Mordecai, bad timing for Haman. Basically, Haman is getting there before the banquet so he can request or ask him the permission to hang Mordecai. An opportune time for Haman's request. And Haman probably didn't know anything about the situation where Mordecai had done this deed, the loyalty that he showed to the king. He probably didn't know anything about it. By saving the king's life. He probably didn't know it was written into the books of the Chronicles. And Haman didn't know that the king would be interested in rewarding Mordecai at that very time. He was there to get permission to hang Mordecai. Bad timing. Surprise, surprise. Of course, the king, verse 5, the king, Haman is there standing in the court. He said, "Let him come in. Bring him on in." And verse 6, the king asked Haman how he should express favor to one whom he had marked for a favorite. What shall it be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman's first thought, with his great pride and boastfulness, who could the king be talking about except me? I'm the first in command. So, once again, he's showing the pride. But he prescribes the highest expressions of honor. To whom will the king delight to honor more than myself? No one deserves it so well as I, thinks Haman. It's a foolish thing to think of ourselves in this manner, to be better than anyone else. And Haman was good at this. So it's a good lesson for all of us. Basically, Haman in his mind is thinking that the king is carving out a reward for him, or Haman. So in his mind, he's the one that's going to be honored. All right, let's read verses 7, 8, and 9. Got a few more minutes. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head. Then let this robe and horse be delivered to the hand of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Poor Haman. Haman prescribes the one to be honored. Once again, he's thinking of himself. He's thinking of the highest honor, what could be done to himself in front of all these people. And verse 9 says, the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, basically to lead this parade. Well, he's going to be one that does that. He said he must be dressed in the royal robes, wear the royal crown, and ride on the king's own horse. In short, he must appear in all the pomp and glory of the king himself. So he is giving the ingredients that he thinks will be bestowed on him, not Mordecai. And so what a surprise he is about to get. Basically, he's wanting to do this so all the people would notice him and notice the things that he has done, how proud he was to be put in this position in his mind. For he must ride in the state through the streets, and it must be proclaimed before him for his honor. Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. For every good subject will honor those whom the king delights to honor. This is in his mind. This is in his heart. So he thinks. So keep in mind, Haman is going there to put Mordecai to death, but it's going to backfire. He built the gallows in order to hang Mordecai, but now he gives the ingredients to king to honor the one the king has in mind, but it's not Haman, it's Mordecai. Any thoughts or comments? Yes.
Here in this, what you're reading about now, about Haman being honored,
Yes.
that could show the providence of God and the reason that Esther wanted to wait another night.
That's
to
true.
make a petition. So here it is, Haman went from there to here.
All the way down.
One
day.
Yeah,
That's-
one day, one petition.
Yeah. And the insomnia of the king Yes. But providential care of God, once again,
Providential God, and
Yep.
also the providential God that Esther asked for another day.
for another day. Yeah, because as you read that, you think, well, why didn't she just go ahead and just say what she wanted? But she had 2 banquets for that cause. But once again, providence of God. All right, verse 10. Verse 10 it says, Then the king said to Haman, Hurry, take the robe and the horse as you have suggested, and do so for Mordecai the Jew. So at this point, he obviously knows Mordecai's a Jew who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken. This is a good idea, Haman. You go do this for Mordecai the Jew. From the highest to the lowest in a split second. He gave the ingredients of honoring the individual the king had in mind. The king loved it. He agreed. He says, now you go do this. How do you think Haman felt after this was spoken? He was at his highest point, patting himself on the back. Right-hand man, all the riches. And he had been requested at not only the one banquet of Queen Esther, but a second banquet. Now all of that flashed before his eyes. The king says, leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken. Do everything that you said. All those that we read in verse 9. How ironic, poor Haman. The king basically had no idea of the irony of the situation in which he placed his favorite minister or prince or servant. He had no clue what Haman had in mind as he came there that morning. Basically, the most significant words in this verse are these words. Mordecai the Jew, on the lips of the king. Haman despised, King despised Haman. I got it all backwards. Let me try this again. Haman despised Mordecai. Mordecai despised Haman. But the king liked both of them, Haman and Mordecai. But the most significant words in that verse, Mordecai the Jew, was on the lips of the king. All right, we'll stop right there at verse 10 in chapter 6, and we will get back to that point on Wednesday night. Thank you so much for your participation and your patience.